Welcome to another podcast of the Riffle series. The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves. So, have you ever wondered what happens when a technology that was, originally built by anonymous cypherpunks to completely bypass the global banking system is suddenly adopted and, aggressively regulated by some of the most powerful financial institutions in the world?
Yeah, it's quite the collision.
Right. Because we're constantly hearing about this supposed clash between this sort of chaotic Wild West frontier of digital assets and the strict, suit and tie reality of legacy finance.
Oh, absolutely.
But for a long time, it really has felt like two completely different universes trying and largely failing to speak the same language.
Well, yeah, because it is a massive translation problem, right? On one hand, you have the permissionless code is law ethos of the blockchain, and that operates on a 247 global scale.
Never sleep.
Exactly. And then on the other side of the table, you have the methodical, highly structured, deeply risk-averse machinery of institutional regulation.
Right, the guys who love their paperwork and settlement windows.
Yeah, and historically, finding a structural bridge between those two worlds hasn't just been difficult. It has often resulted in regulations that completely misunderstand the underlying technology they're trying to police.
Yeah, which is exactly why today is so important. Because today, literally today, April 29, 2026, we are looking at a framework that might actually solve that translation problem.
It's a huge day.
It really is. The Financial Services Regulatory Authority of the Abu Dhabi Global Market, the ADGM, has officially finalized its regulatory framework for the staking of virtual assets.
And they didn't hold back.
No, they did not. We have the complete stack of official releases right here in front of us. We've got the news announcement, plus the highly anticipated amendments to their core rulebooks like the conduct of business, funds, and glossary rulebooks.
The holy trinity of ADGM compliance, basically.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically decode these dense texts. We need to unpack what these new rules mean for the institutionalization of digital assets.
Which is what everyone has been waiting for.
Right. We want to see how a major global regulator is attempting to build a safe highway for institutional capital without accidentally breaking the very mechanics that make blockchain technology valuable in the first place.
Well, and that tension right there is the central challenge for any sovereign regulator stepping into this space.
Yeah.
Well, for sure, because if you mandate compliance measures that are too draconian, you just completely stifle the innovation. Or, you drive it offshore to totally unregulated jurisdictions.
Which defeats the purpose of regulating it.
Exactly. But then, if you leave the framework too loose, you expose retail and institutional clients to catastrophic, unmitigated financial ruin.
We've all seen how that movie ends.
Right. So what is fascinating about the framework finalized today is how surgically the ADGM has approached that balance. Specifically, starting with how they've decided to legally define the activity itself.
Okay, let's unpack this definition. Because normally regulators just throw a giant heavy blanket over everything and just call it, crypto yield.
Yeah, magic internet money interest.
Exactly. But the ADGM has drawn a very hard, incredibly specific line in the sand regarding what staking actually is. From what the glossary rulebook outlines, staking is strictly defined as employing a client's virtual assets to operate a distributed ledger network.
Or to facilitate its economic or operational security.
Right, in exchange for rewards. So under this specific legal umbrella, staking is strictly it's like volunteering your assets to serve as the active security guards of the network, earning a salary for keeping the blockchain safe.
That is the core of it, yeah. And the regulator's precision here is paramount. They're identifying the exact function of the asset.
It's not just sitting there.
No, it's working. And what is equally notable in the official release is their explicit expansion to include non-proof-of-stake models.
Wait, really? So they're going beyond just traditional proof of stake?
Yeah, they noted that as long as a consensus model has materially similar characteristics to proof of stake, it falls under this framework.
Oh, wow. So they are actively future-proofing the rules. Because they know the tech won't sit still, right? Like a new blockchain might launch tomorrow using delegated proof of stake or some hybrid proof of authority model.
Exactly, where tokens are still locked up to secure the network, but the architecture is just slightly different.
Right. The regulator's basically saying, we don't care what you call the algorithm, we care about the economic function.
Function over form. Always. But, to truly appreciate the sophistication of this framework, we really have to look at what the ADGM explicitly excluded from that definition.
Ah, the exclusions. Yes.
They drew a very tall fence around the concept of network security. So providing assets to decentralized liquidity pools, lending them out, borrowing, margin funding.
Structured price-linked products.
All right. Or even locking up tokens just for promotional purposes. None of that qualifies as staking under these new rules.
Okay, this is where I want to push back a bit, or at least play devil's advocate for you listening, because you might be wondering, why such a strict fence?
It's a fair question.
Right, because from a retail investor's perspective, handing your tokens to a lending platform to earn 5% APY feels functionally identical to staking your tokens on Ethereum to earn 5% APY.
You're just looking at the yield.
Yeah, the end result is you getting more crypto. So why does the ADGM care so intensely about how you are generating the yield?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because the underlying mechanical risks to the client's capital are fundamentally, astronomically different.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at those exclusions. When an investor lends their assets to a trading desk or a centralized platform, they're taking on pure counterparty credit risk.
Meaning trusting the guy on the other side.
Exactly. The primary danger is that the borrower goes bankrupt or takes a bad trade and simply cannot return the principal.
Right. Human error or insolvency.
Yeah. Now, consider a decentralized liquidity pool, like an automated market maker. If you deposit your assets there, you're taking on severe smart contract risk.
Sure.
Hacks, bugs in the code where someone can drain the entire pool. And you're also taking on market risk, like impermanent loss if the ratio of the two assets you provided wildly diverges in price.
So the failure points in lending or liquidity pools are basically either human bankruptcy, bad trading, or code exploitation.
Precisely. But, and this is the key, when you stake an asset to physically secure a network protocol, you are taking on a totally different category of danger. You are taking on protocol-level operational risk.
Which is what exactly?
The danger isn't a bad trade. The danger is that the server running your validator node loses power or goes offline or broadcasts a conflicting message to the network.
Oh, I see. It's an IT infrastructure risk.
Yes. Regulators must isolate the specific operational risk of network consensus from the financial risks of lending or complex market making.
Because they require different rules.
Exactly. If a regulator lumps them all together under one giant crypto yield umbrella, they can't accurately write safety rules. You can't write a safety manual for a high-frequency day trader and expect it to protect a network security guard.
Wow, yeah. That perfectly transitions us to how the ADGM is actually writing that safety manual for the regulated firms, what they call the Authorized Persons.
The COBS amendments.
Right, the Conduct of Business Amendments.
Right.
Because now that the regulator has legally walled off what staking is, the immediate challenge becomes consumer protection. Like, how do you force a traditional suit-and-tie firm to handle these volatile, highly technical assets safely?
And these rules they released today are incredibly demanding.
They really are. They leave almost no room for ambiguity. The framework categorizes these tokens as safe custody assets.
Which is a very specific legal designation.
Yes, and if an authorized person intends to deploy a client's safe custody assets into a staking protocol, they require explicit prior written permission from the client.
You can't just assume they want to stake it.
Right. This cannot be buried on page 40 of a generic terms of service update that you just blindly click accept on. Furthermore, the firm has to guarantee that the client is not disadvantaged by the use of their assets.
And the rewards they earn are strictly policed, too.
Yeah, the rewards are limited to accepted virtual assets and accepted fiat reference tokens. So a firm can't stake your Ethereum and decide to pay out your rewards in some newly minted, highly illiquid meme coin.
Right, they're restricting the ecosystem to establish crypto assets or approve stable coins to filter out that extreme market volatility.
But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is where the friction between legacy finance and blockchain tech is just fascinating to me. The mandatory disclosures.
Oh, the transparency requirements here are some of the most robust we've seen globally.
Seriously, before a single token is staked, the authorized person has to inform the client of the exact duration their assets will be locked up, the specific unstaking and withdrawal process, and the specific operational risks involved.
And it doesn't stop there. Beyond the upfront disclosures, they must provide a real-time, constantly updated dashboard.
Let's talk about that dashboard, because to me, this feels like a massive technological hurdle for a traditional financial firm.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Yeah. Legacy banking systems are used to operating on, what, T+1 or T+2 settlement windows? They batch transactions at the end of the business day?
Then they go home.
Exactly. But the blockchain never sleeps. It operates 247/365. And the ADGM is demanding that these firms provide their clients with real-time data on total assets staked, rewards earned, accrued fees, uptime levels,
The remaining lockup periods.
and most importantly, any assets lost to slashing.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that the inclusion of slashing in a regulatory conduct of business manual that is a watershed moment for institutional crypto.
How so?
It represents a sovereign regulator demanding that the unforgiving physical reality of the blockchain be brought directly into the daylight.
Yeah, because crypto natives know all about slashing. Like, if your validator node misbehaves or just goes offline, the network protocol automatically punishes you by permanently burning a portion of your staked tokens.
It's just hard-coded.
Right, an algorithmic penalty. It's standard for them.
Mm.
But my question is, if an authorized person has the discretion to stake assets, aren't these intense real-time metrics going to overwhelm the average investor? Like, is this genuine transparency or just a way for the firm to shift liability to the client?
Well, it's about forcing a shift in how they understand custody. In traditional finance, if an asset is in safe custody, it's sitting passively in a vault.
It's safe. It's inert.
Right. But in staking, the asset is actively working. It's exposed to the elements. If your assets can be mathematically destroyed by a decentralized algorithm simply because a server in a data center lost power for 20 minutes,
It happens.
it happens. And the client has an absolute right to monitor that server's uptime. By mandating reports on slashing, the regulator ensures the client understands their asset isn't just sitting in a digital vault, it's physically at risk.
That makes a lot of sense. So if these financial firms don't want to run their own bare metal servers, because let's face it, an investment bank in Abu Dhabi probably doesn't want to become a full-time 24/7 server maintenance farm for Ethereum, they're going to outsource it?
Of course, they'll use a staking service provider.
Right. They'll hire a third-party tech company, a dedicated node operator to do the heavy lifting. But traditional finance outsourcing is usually just like a massive paperwork exercise. You sign a vendor agreement, do an annual review,
Yeah.
and move on.
Not here.
So the ADGM doesn't allow that kind of fire and forget outsourcing when the risk of slashing is this severe.
Absolutely not. The framework acknowledges they'll use these third parties, but under COBS 17.0.7, the due diligence requirements placed on the authorized person are immense.
What do they have to check?
Before onboarding a tech farm, the regulated firm must forensically examine their past performance. We're talking about auditing their historical runtime, their downtime incidents, their specific slashing history, how they manage withdrawal queues, and the entire architecture of their cybersecurity.
And the framework mandates a very specific property clause in the written agreement, too.
Yes, that's crucial.
It must explicitly state that the virtual assets are not the property of the staking service provider. And I really want to emphasize why this is so critical.
The bankruptcy cases.
Exactly. Over the last few years, we saw massive crypto platforms go bankrupt. And in many of those cases, because the terms of service were murky, the courts ruled that the retail clients deposited crypto was technically the property of the bankrupt company.
It was a disaster.
The clients just became unsecured creditors fighting over pennies.
Yeah, a catastrophic lesson for the industry. But the ADGM is applying that lesson proactively here. By legally ring-fencing the assets, if the third-party server farm goes bankrupt or gets sued by its own creditors, the staked assets are untouchable.
They're shielded.
Right. The tech provider is merely renting out their computing power. They have no legal claim to the underlying capital they're securing the network with.
But you know what really caught my eye? The continuing operational rules.
The incident reporting.
Yeah. The provider must immediately inform the authorized person of any incidents, including protocol-level risks, major software upgrade schedules, or governance votes that can suddenly freeze withdrawals.
They have to stay in constant communication.
So what does this all mean? Let's play out a hypothetical scenario here. An authorized person hires a top-tier server farm. The decentralized community of a major blockchain votes to implement a controversial software upgrade that unexpectedly locks up all staked assets for a month.
Which is entirely possible in crypto.
Right. Chaos ensues, and the server farm's nodes go down during the upgrade, resulting in a slashing event. Who is ultimately left holding the bag for those burned assets? The tech provider who failed to keep the servers online, or the authorized person who holds the client relationship?
Well, this raises an important question, and it touches on the core philosophy of institutional regulation. You can outsource the function, but you cannot outsource the liability. Yeah. The ADGM enforces a continuing obligation to monitor. The regulated firm cannot just sign the vendor contract and walk away.
Right.
If a major software upgrade is happening, the authorized person must reevaluate whether their tech provider is capable of handling the transition.
They have to actively manage the relationship.
If the tech provider fails and the client's assets are slashed, the financial firm will have to answer to the regulator. They'll have to prove their initial and ongoing due diligence was flawless. If they missed red flags, the liability sits squarely on their shoulders.
So the ADGM is effectively saying, you are welcome to rent the servers, but you cannot rent out your regulatory obligations.
Exactly.
Now, taking a step back and looking at this entire structure,
Yep.
we have a regulated firm pooling together multiple clients' assets, locking those assets up, and outsourcing the daily management to a third party, all with the goal of generating a passive yield.
Right.
If you abstract that away from crypto for a second, that sounds incredibly familiar. In traditional finance, if I pool client money and have a third party manage it for a return, that is a mutual fund.
It sounds exactly like one.
But the ADGM has a specific rule addressing this exact comparison.
Yes, the FUNDS rulebook. There's a highly specific amendment, 2.1.20, which explicitly states that an arrangement made by an authorized person for the purpose of facilitating the staking of virtual assets belonging to its clients does not constitute a fund.
It's just a definitive one-sentence carve-out. So if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but the ADGM explicitly writes a rule saying this is not a duck.
Yeah.
Why?
Good question.
It's just a regulatory favor. Are they just trying to save the staking industry from drowning in traditional mutual fund paperwork?
It might appear that way at first glance, especially to a traditional compliance officer, but structurally, treating a staking pool like a mutual fund fundamentally misunderstands the technology.
Okay, break that down for me.
It's like applying maritime law to a spacecraft.
Okay.
I mean, yes, they are both vessels, but the physical environments they operate in and the existential risks they face are completely different.
So what is a traditional mutual fund compliance officer looking for that doesn't apply here?
Well, a mutual fund is built around market risk and liquidity risk. The assets in a mutual fund are being actively traded. They're bought and sold in a portfolio to capture market gains based on a manager's specific strategy.
Right.
So the compliance officer is monitoring portfolio turnover, asset diversification, NAV calculations. But in a staking environment, the assets aren't being traded at all.
They're just sitting there working.
Right. They are mathematically locked into a protocol. They are physically securing a decentralized network. A mutual fund prospectus does not have a section detailing the risks of a server power outage causing the algorithmic destruction of capital.
Because mutual funds don't get slashed. Like a bad trade might lose money, but a mutual fund doesn't get mathematically burned by the stock exchange because the portfolio manager's internet went down.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. The regulator is creating bespoke rules, the COBS amendments we just talked about, rather than forcing a square peg into a round hole. They are regulating the specific gears and levers of the blockchain.
That is such a crucial distinction. It really demonstrates a level of technological literacy from a sovereign regulator that is genuinely rare. They actually understand the mechanics under the hood.
And they're building guardrails that respect those mechanics.
Which really brings us to the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, regarding what this all means for the broader financial landscape.
Yeah.
The journey we've just taken through this framework, the strict definitions separating staking from lending, the forced daylight on brutal mechanics like slashing, the extreme vetting of tech providers, and these bespoke carve-outs from traditional fund rules, it proves something major.
It proves that institutional crypto is no longer a contradiction in terms.
Exactly. By strictly defining staking, the ADGM has built a safe highway for digital assets, one that acknowledges the unique, often unforgiving physics of the blockchain without pretending it's just a digital version of the stock market.
They've effectively tamed a specific part of the frontier without paving over what makes the technology valuable.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating, forward-looking question for you to ponder. We saw how the ADGM drew a very tight regulatory circle around what staking legally is.
Very tight.
Right. They specifically excluded lending, liquidity pools, and structured products. So as institutional capital flows into this newly regulated staking environment, what happens to the rest of the ecosystem?
It's the multi-trillion-dollar question.
Will the next wave of aggressive crypto innovation naturally rush toward those unregulated exclusions, seeking out the last remaining pockets of permissionless finance? Or Are those complex activities simply the next dominoes waiting to fall under their own strict, custom-tailored regulatory frameworks?
We'll have to wait and see.
You really have to wonder how long it will be before they write the rule book for the rest of it.